When it comes to grid will be a topic for updates to come. If we press Alt W, we can jump over to Boxcutter and activate grid, and currently we are going to be talking about infinite. Infinite, as of our previous updates, was pretty basic. It does the job when it comes to needing a grid. However, this grid begins to fall apart the moment you begin requesting more points. So for example, right now we have a default of 10, which we found to be safe and fast for most computers. If we were to jump this up to 30, we see that the dot for snapping is no longer keeping up with my cursor, meaning that there's now some sort of speed bottleneck occurring. If we were to press D and ensure that we are in box, let's say I want to begin drawing here, we can just see that the grid is just not able to keep up with my motions at 30 on the count. So let's increase this to 100. So now we have 100 points, and that means whenever I hold control, I press control, and then the grid pops up a few seconds later, and we see that the dot is absolutely having no time keeping up with the cursor. And this is where Grid Infinite somewhat failed as a system, and is the reason that Grid Static was born, was to attempt to get past these limitations. But that doesn't mean that we are done with Infinite. It just means that there's work that needs to be done with it, and we are of course want to do that work. So here I'm just showing you just how things could possibly get a little bit slow with our previous grid. However, we bring up our newest update where I'm currently using infinite, and here's what we are looking at whenever we're using 10. However, let's actually jump this up to 30. As you remember, 30 was also falling apart a little bit, and we see that 30 is now working admirably. In case you're wondering why my shape is a wire, you can press H during draw and it will toggle your shape becoming a wire or not, just like I just did, to bring it back solid. And here we are able to work on a 30 count grid without any issue. We see that the cut actually failed, and that's because I was hotlining, meaning I cut precisely onto another edge, causing a Boolean failure to occur. So here we are looking at our segments at 30, but let's increase this to 100. 100 was where things truly hit its pinch point before, and we see that now that is no longer a thing. And this is actually kind of our stage 2 update to the grid, just to improve things with Mac and ensure that things were as stable as possible when it came to Mac OS. However, there's even another level of grid that we aim to go for that'll be showing up in a future update. It could have been in today's, but we wanted to kind of unwrap this thing in stages. So here we see my grid set to 200, and while I can't even see the bounds of the grid until I scale it down, we see that the grid is actually moving on screen quite fast, and we're able to use it and have the dot follow the cursor, and there's no lag behind. So seeing this in action is something that, you know, I found to be truly impressive, and I'm just glad to see that it's finally been accomplished. And now we can say that the grid inside of Boxcutter is as fast as it's supposed to be. However, there's even more speed to be had here. In fact, internal testing shows us that we can actually break it down once we get to something like 300, which is not able to be hit because of the limit that is specified. But normally, if we were able to jump this up any higher than 200, this speed would also begin to break down. But just letting users know that we now are aiming to support even more units than ever. So whenever it comes to performing snapping, you should be able to see a grid all the way to infinity if requested, but also, of course, the bounds is the very foundation of what infinite grid's about, is fading it out to something nice. So users of the grid, you'll definitely be noticing some speed improvements over the next updates coming to Boxcutter, but just letting you know that it's definitely much faster than it was before.